Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Larry Lee. I am president and publisher of the Sacramento Observer newspaper. I have alongside me Observer senior staff writer Genoa Barrow, a veteran of local journalism reporting, and we're excited to be joined by a great group of panelists who will help us discuss about the faith outreach within the African American community here in Sacramento related to the vaccine and its efforts. What we would like to do is kick off this program with a brief video that will kind of articulate some of the reasons why we're here to discuss this issue.
African Americans have been disproportionately impacted by the continued coronavirus pandemic. The African American community, however, remains among the least of those who have been vaccinated. As of September 3rd, 84% of Sacramento County residents were fully vaccinated. However, according to Sacramento's Department of Public Health, just 39.4% of local African Americans have received at least one dose of the shot. Local clergy, though, have the faith to move mountains. In the tradition of black churches being at the forefront during challenging times, the local faith community has stepped up during the COVID-19 pandemic. Several area pastors have stepped up and gotten involved, working to ensure that the congregations and communities they serve have access. Over the last few weeks, Observer senior staff writer Genoa Barrow has explored how Sacramento's black community has advocated for its own health during the pandemic through her series, Giving Ourselves a Shot. Her reporting has shown how many organizations have worked to make sure that vulnerable residents have access to the vaccine. However, with so many still reluctant to get vaccinated, access is not the only barrier. Many say a change of heart needs to happen, and some of Sacramento's faith community leaders are prepared to intercede.
Well, great. So joining us this evening, of course, as I mentioned, Ms. Genoa Barrow, the Observer senior staff writer. Good evening, Genoa. How you doing?
Good evening. I'm good.
It's good to see you in person.
Yes, yes.
And it's
hard to see each other now.
I know. In the world of virtual work, Genoa and I don't get to see each other this often. So it's good to be joining together. And we've got a great group of panelists here that are going to help us discuss about, really your series. And Genoa, if you don't mind, just tell us and our audience a little bit about how we got here with the series that you've been working on.
Oh, sure. As everyone knows, COVID changed, much of how we do what we do in our everyday lives. But we, at the Observer, of course, wanted to still be responsive to the community. And in this space, obviously, as the video pointed out, COVID has hit us hard. It continues to hit us hard. So we wanted to make sure, as a newspaper, that we were still, while we were safe, and we changed the way we sort of report things, but we still wanted to report on the many ways that the continued pandemic has impacted our community. And so we started covering different things related to the pandemic. And I just kept hearing, how the efforts were community driven and the whole vaccine equity and the rollout. And so we've been covering that for quite some time. And then the fellowship with the USC Center, Annenberg Center for Health Journalism, that opportunity came along, and it provided an opportunity to take a deeper dive into the issue of vaccine equity. And so we rolled out, worked for quite some time, and worked on a two-part series that actually became a three-part series because, as someone said, stories begat stories, and
Yes.
there's just so much going on centered around vaccine equity. It was hard to keep it into just the two.
Sure. I can imagine from doing your reporting that we probably could do a 10-part series on really the inequities that have impacted our community disproportionately. And we've got, some really what we call, boots on the ground kind of folks who have been really trying to fight for equity within our community. And I know that through a lot of your reporting, as the video showed, the majority community and Sacramento at large has done pretty good with the vaccine efforts, but there is definitely a lack of the vaccine getting into our community. From that, I think it would be good to bring in some of our folks that we have here. So joining us this evening, we have the county's public health officer, Dr. Olivia Kasiri.
Hardest working woman in Sacramento County.
Yes, she is. And we are very thankful to have her time because we know she's extremely busy and is everywhere, it seems like. And then we have two faith leaders who have been absolutely wonderful. Pastor Mark Meeks and his church in Oak Park has been really like almost a war zone almost with trying to make sure, or a mass unit trying to get folks vaccinated. And then Pastor Joy Johnson, who's, as I know very closely, has been working really well with inside the structures of the vaccine rollout. So if we can just get each of you, and we'll start with you, Dr. Kasiri, just tell our audience just a little bit about your role and why you're here trying to help advocate for vaccine equity within the African American community.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on this show. As Public Health Officer for Sacramento County, there are a few things that I am responsible for. One of those is monitoring the pandemic, looking at the numbers every single day, looking for where there are disparities, looking for groups that are vulnerable. And then the other is making sure that we are able to get resources to those groups that are being hit hard. So the reason I'm here this evening is to talk about vaccine, to talk about the experience that I have had working with the churches in Sacramento County and some of the successes as well as some of the challenges we still have ahead of us.
And I know we really want to talk about the successes that we've been having. It's really important to make sure that our community has role models and examples of what works well in the community. Pastor Meeks, you have been really a stalwart in really trying to make sure to get the vaccine in the arms, as we say. Would you tell our audience a little bit about?
Thank you, Larry and Genoa. Thank you for the opportunity. We're at City Church of Sacramento. I've been privileged to be pastor there. We'll celebrate 10 years. We've been in the North Oak Park community. We're coming up on 4 years now. And it was on, literally, it was on Valentine's Day evening when I was looking at the news and seeing, just as you well said, Mr. Lee, how access it seemed to be easy for majority community, for those with the means to be able to access and navigate at the time, which was a very competitive process to get the vaccine. And I was, quite honestly, I was frustrated. And I was just sitting on the couch watching TV, picked up the phone and text the vice mayor, our councilman, Jay Chenier, and asked, what's going on in Oak Park? And his response to me was, nothing to my knowledge. Let me get back to you. He got back to me, and I, kudos to Jay for his response. And fast forward within a week,
to the Sacramento County public health early on about equity in our neighborhoods. And I think we were very successful in bringing to their attention that when the vaccines became available, it wasn't as easy for African Americans to access the locations because most of the locations required you to have a car. We did not have cars. So through those efforts, much more access came our way. And then I was, I was, when you raise a question, you have to be ready to be part of the solution. And I was given the opportunity to begin to serve as one of the founding members of the Health Equity Task Force for the Sacramento Public Health. And I am sitting on that task force now.
Great. So you all have to excuse us. I think we had a brief moment of technical difficulty. We're blind, so we can hear you though. So we're going to keep the show rolling, as they say. So I'll hand it over to Genoa here because I know she wants to ask you guys a question or two.
Yes, I wanted to start with Dr. Kassir. And we've talked several times during the pandemic and my reporting here at the paper. And so, you've always talked about continued outreach to the community and working with trusted messengers. So can you talk about, how you have partnered with faith-based leaders to drive home the message that that we need to continue to get vaccinated?
Actually, the outreach has been both ways. As Pastor Joy mentioned, they did reach out to the Board of Supervisors and Public Health to ask us what our plans were. But even prior to that, I remember when the pandemic first became really serious within Sacramento County, a group of African American leaders reached out to me and said, "We know that we're starting out behind already. What do we need to do to protect our communities?" And that really touched me because they were not trying to deny or to ask questions or to make it seem smaller than it really was. They knew this was serious and they knew the communities were already hurting and they wanted to make sure that the communities were protected. And that really was the start of our relationship. And it has just grown from there. After when the vaccine became more readily available, we were able to work with the community-based agencies to look at where to put the pop-up clinics. We've worked with many of them in South Sacramento and now planning to work in North Highlands as well, where we're still lagging behind in vaccinations. And even with the testing sites, they were an integral part of deciding where those testing sites would be and looking at all the issues, how to make it more accessible to the community members that they knew had barriers. So a lot of ways in which we've worked with them, also with businesses, being able to work through a contract we have with Sierra Health Foundation to be able to get money out to the community-based agencies to provide wraparound services, to get people trained so that they have the correct information to give out to people about COVID-19, about the vaccine, and be able to overcome some of that hesitancy.
Can I ask you, Dr. Kassir, what has been the biggest messaging problem that our community, specifically the African American community, has faced? In your role, you obviously have to combat disinformation and things like that. So, and we'll see some videos later on in this program where we talk to some just regular folks in the community, and some folks really said they were a little hesitant about getting the vaccine. What has been the biggest, and are still, and as we know, the numbers are still not exactly where we would like them to be. So what has been the biggest obstacle to kind of get that information out, and what would you like to tell folks today that could dispel those myths?
I can think of two. Initially, I think it was really an issue of access. We didn't have enough vaccine, and we had the vaccine sites in only drive-through places that were difficult for many of people in the community to reach. But as we were able to go more out into the community, I think one of the things we found is that a lot of people were getting misinformation from the internet. So people would come with videos from Facebook, from TikTok, from WhatsApp, And it was really difficult for us to keep up with that. So being able to get more people in the community with the correct information, I think has really helped us. But we still have a long way to go because there's more information that comes up almost daily. And so being able to get ahead of that.
Gotcha.
And Pastor Meeks, as you mentioned, your church there in Oak Park was a clinic that was able to, get quite a bit of folks vaccinated. Can you talk about some of the, the challenges and also some of the wins and what you guys saw in getting people past like the hesitancy, some of the digital divide issues that came up as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Dr. Kasiri, I think she summed it up very well. Originally, I would say it broke down in thirds. A third, it was an issue of access. A third of the population, and again, I'm talking about Oak Park, roughly 50,000 individuals in the 95817, 95820. A third was, I have questions. I'm not a no, but I just don't know. And there was probably a third that were a hard no. And so our city church's energy was around creating access to those that want the vaccine, but were challenged to get it. And it was literally folks were, say, gaming the system. But if you had internet access, mobility, chances of you getting a vaccine were greatly increased beyond someone who didn't. But then there was also a huge population that they really needed a conversation. They needed hand-holding. It's more than anecdotal. The volunteers at City Church, they literally stood in line with many of the folks that were receiving vaccine that were frightened, literally frightened to receive the vaccine, but had the wherewithal to realize that they wanted to receive the vaccine. And so they stood with them person to person and held their hand, cried, prayed, and went through that whole process. And then there was a group, and still it's probably a third hard no. Dr. Kasiri could check me on the statistic or whatever, but I recall, and ours was to go after those that would otherwise fall through the cracks, if you will. So I was at the Wellspring Women's Center, and I'll never forget engaging with one of the clients there, and I said, "Have you been vaccinated?" And her response was, "No." I said, "Would you like to be vaccinated?" Her response to me was, "Are you trying to kill me?" I said, "I've been vaccinated. I'm still living." Her response was, "Good for you." And it was a hard no. And so you spend energy trying to explain and to encourage, but fully recognizing that, well, at that point, the best I could do was plant a seed, and hopefully we'll be able to circle back. But it was a hard no. And I think there's a hard no constituency within our community.
Yeah. And then Pastor Meeks, we've heard some from different pulpits use their pulpit to battle against the virus and the vaccine. What would you say to other faith leaders to encourage them to really help push the vaccine within all of our communities? Because regardless of whether you're African American or not, if you're not African American, you're just as susceptible to getting the virus as African Americans are, and so we all become vulnerable when we don't spread out the proper messaging. So what would you tell other faith leaders about trying to make sure that they use their pulpit to get the vaccine awareness out?
I think Dr. Kasiri, she touched on it, and she's much better than I. But we've come to a point where we've created a false equivalency between likes and shares and what have you in social media with real facts, with real information. because it's popular doesn't make it accurate. And the news of late is such that in certain states, certain constituent groups, in what I was watching today, had to deal with Idaho. The vaccination rates are very low, and the ICU capacity is also very low, because 99.9% of the folks are crowding the ICU beds. And they were by and large unvaccinated. So to your question, what would I say to clergy that would say, my body, my choice? Well, unless and until you get to the point of having information that can counter what I see, and information that I trust with folks, with communicators like Dr. Siri, where do we have the position to be able to say, well, no, I think we ought not do that. I think what is happening is that there's been a conflation of a lot of things, from societal issues to political issues, and it just so happens that the vaccination, the pandemic and the vaccination, is swept up in that, and it almost becomes a marker for bigger other social ills. And so that is being used. I mean, as I've shared, and I'll stop, I've shared at City Church, at what point did wearing a mask or not wearing a mask become a spiritual hill to die on? I don't understand that. I don't understand that. But if you watch the news, and you'll hear certain preachers, we can't, it's like, are you serious? Are you really serious? You're not going to wear a mask, because there's a spiritual connection to that. If anything, it ought to reflect that, yes, I am my sister and brother's keeper. So I'm going to wear this mask to protect my family. So.
Well said. Pastor Joy, we're going to come back to you in a second, because we want to ask you a couple questions as well, too. So, but we'd like to make sure we hear from another pastor, Pastor Les Simmons from South Sacramento Christian Center, who also has been on the ground trying to make sure folks have had resources and access during the pandemic. So we'll go to a video and come right back.
Les Simmons, pastor of South Sacramento Christian Center. I've been senior leader here for going on 3 years, but also full-time here for going on 22 years, I believe. Yeah, part of our role as a church has always been to create safe space as well as meet the needs of the community. This church was founded on community driven. When the pandemic hit, we did see challenges around testing, getting folks access to testing, either because they were located in different parts of the city or they just didn't know how to do it. So as one of the predominant kind of African American parts of the community and predominantly African American church, we knew we needed to advocate, and then once we advocated, we knew we needed to facilitate. So earlier on in March 2020, when the pandemic hit, around April, we really start pushing for this, and then by end of April, early March 2020, we actually became one of the first community test sites. Since that day, we've tested hundreds of thousands of people, not only created a really high efficient through our staff. Actually, Katrina Simmons is the one who leads that team of folks that are both paid staff, thanks to a lot of sponsors and partners like Sierra Health Foundation, Sacramento County, the SAC Collab, SAC City, numerous other partners, including Kaiser. We've led the way to create a safe, friendly, faith-filled environment for folks to get tested and get vaccination as well. So you can come to this space on our test day, and you can see a line pretty much wrapped around the building, especially as a result of the Delta variant. You may see a couple of hundred people easy, but we are so efficient where you get in line in maybe 20, 30 minutes from the time you check in to the time you get your test. In addition to that, we created another line for vaccination that either we have on the spot on a weekly basis, or we will help schedule your vaccination appointment at some other community site as well too. The reason testing and vaccination was important both to us as a church and then us as a community. For one, our values have always been to save lives. These are the tools that were put in place either through testing so you can know the state you're in, or through vaccination. These were the tools that were put in place to save lives. And for us, having that as a resource and as a tool to empower and support our community, especially during this time, was vital to us, right? I think history will tell, whether that's a year from now, 2 years, 10 years, 50 years from now, history will tell the story of what the church was doing during one of the most challenging times in our history. And for us, South Sacramento Christian Center, in the city of Sacramento, I wanted to say we help save lives.
Kudos to Pastor Simmons, First Lady of the church, Katrina Simmons, and leading the team there, and both offering vaccinations and testing. And as we know, testing has ramped up again now with more businesses and entities requiring vaccination or proof of vaccination or weekly testing. So some of those lines are doubling back up again. So we thank them for the leadership that they're doing there. And Pastor Joy, I wanted to ask you, people have said, being able to go to the churches and get a shot has been a blessing. Can you talk about being sort of aiming people to those efforts and being behind the scenes, as Larry said, in some of those spaces where you have to sort of, convince folks that, the community is worth some of these extra efforts?
Yes. Unbeknownst to many, the question of health and healing has been a debatable issue for discussion in clergy settings, in theological settings, in faith settings. It has at times been one in which we're challenged to see if we're praying enough, then we might not need the interventions of health and healing. And so through many of these efforts of bringing the churches, the clergy leaders, certainly I'm speaking from the Christian church, the Black Christian churches, it has been a monumental step forward in bringing our clergy leaders to understand that, or to even embrace the advances of health and the advances of healing. And I think that's what has brought about the trusted messenger role of the clergy. Dr. Cassier spoke of it a moment ago, and we speak of it oftentimes in our task force about bringing and attracting the people to come to a place where they already, first of all, feel safe, one, and then secondly, to a place where they have relationships. The pop-up clinics, the clinics that just come and go, they do have an impact, but it does seem to be so much better when we can have a longer standing clinic. At least at our locations, we had 6 weeks to build relationships with the community there. And so those who Pastor Meek spoke of a moment ago, you're just kind of walking through life with day by day, and you have an opening, a window to ask them, have you been vaccinated? Would you like to be vaccinated? That's critical in building the bridge that's necessary for those that are sort of hesitant, not a strong, hard no, but they're hesitant because they just don't know enough, one, but then they're hesitant because they don't feel safe. And so I think that what we've been able to see by working through the churches and having pop-ups such as down at South Sacramento Christian Center, having it be there so that people know it's going to be there, and there is a trusted messenger, there's a trusted location, there's an opportunity to build relationships, and that's what our people seem to thrive on.
Yes. And Pastor Joy, I mentioned, you've been working so diligently within behind the scenes trying to make sure that there's even access. The whole fight of vaccine equity, and at the time it was testing equity at the very beginning of the pandemic. And you've been fighting really hard. Tell us a little bit about the challenges that you faced with trying to get the powers that be to be more receptive to that fight. And then also tell us a little bit in the back of your mind what you might be concerned about moving forward.
Okay, I think that the greatest fight, and it is the one I believe that we have resolved, and that is that the neighborhoods where equity, where access is needed, is available and it's open, and that's the best place to put it. I think that was the hardest fight, to say, come down into where the people are, because they will come and get tested. They will, because at first there was this rumor that we just wouldn't get tested, and then the further rumor that we weren't going to get vaccinated. And there's still a lot of work to be done. There is. I'm really thrilled, and I want to take my cap off to the ambassadors from our community, the influencers from our community that stand strong in going out and making, and tooting the horn, shouting the trumpet that we need to get vaccinated. So we still have a long ways to go, but the hardest won battle, I believe, is that of coming right into the community where people live. My hope, I would say, and I don't know that there's a clear answer for it yet. It's kind of to what Pastor Meeks spoke of a moment ago, and to get other clergy, to get all clergy. And I'm only speaking of clergy because that's my profession as well. There are others, but to get them to sing off the sheet of music that says it's certain, our faith and our faith walk is certainly about more than my own personal safety and my own personal preference. And that is modeled all throughout Scripture. That when we start anything, even the unbelievable pandemic that has fallen upon us, what we want to do as folks of faith is to examine, where can I be the Christ in this situation? Where can I be the Christ in this situation? And when we ask ourselves that, then it takes us to something else Pastor Meek said a moment ago about being a good neighbor. What Christ showed us is that, he went outside of his place of safety to help and provide safety for others. We have scripture after scripture after scripture. I won't start preaching. However, I mean, our very walk at this time could preach itself, right? Even just one little thing I'd say, Brother Larry, is that even if we looked at the discovery and the manufacturing of this vaccine, we would see faith in action because it took such perseverance after no, after no, after no, after rejection, after rejection, after rejection. It took such perseverance it's just faith demonstrated, lifting up, out of life and showing us what faith looks like, right? And so, if I could just somehow or another get that into the thinking of fellow clergymen, fellow clergywomen, because we do a lot to add to the confusion. Social media and all that stuff, yes. But when it really comes down to it, Brother Larry, there are some voices that have been put on this land at this particular time that have power to override anything that social media is doing. But we're not singing the same tune. So anyway.
There you go. We want to go to a quick video and come back to Dr. Kasiri. Genoa's got a question that she wants to make sure and ask her. So we also want to make sure and let those folks that might be watching us on YouTube or Facebook Live, feel free if you've got a question or two we want to ask, go ahead and put those into the chat area, and then we're going to make sure and try and bring those voices and those questions up for our panelists. But we'll be right back after this video here.
What has impacted me the most was wearing of the mask. I like to wear lipstick, and I've not been able to wear lipstick for over a year.
The pandemic has impacted me in a way that I can't get out to do the things I used to do.
What were the things that you used to like to do?
Go shopping, visiting other people, couldn't have our family reunions.
I continued to work, but my kids were at home and they're teenagers, so I saw the grades slip because they wouldn't wake up on time. So that affected us a lot so far as their grades.
What impacted me the most about the pandemic was probably really just the ability to move around, to do the things that you desire to do that you would normally do, but just kind of had barriers down to.
Kind of made me open my mindset more and just really learn more about myself and more about my family and just, more about everybody else that I know.
I've been vaccinated, yes. My daughter, who we live together, she has a compromised immune system.
I have not been vaccinated as of yet. I get weekly testing and just do natural things. I'm a little hesitant because the vaccine was so new.
I have been vaccinated. I believe in acknowledging God in all things, and He will direct your path. And my concern was because my children felt they could not come around me because they wanted to protect me.
I haven't been vaccinated yet. I'm definitely planning on doing it. It's just, I've kind of had, little ups and downs about it, but I feel like, I should definitely do it because I did catch it one time and I don't want to catch it again.
I too have been vaccinated. The reason why I decided to get vaccinated was because it's all in God's hands, and I know He's not going to do anything to harm me, in a sense of letting someone put something in me that isn't good for my body.
A friend of mine gave me Psalm 91, and I read that, and I read it over myself and my household, and it said that pestilence will not come nigh near me, that the Lord will protect me and guide me through all of this.
The scripture that I like the most is death and life is in the power of the tongue. So I speak life. I pray over my children before they go to school, just that God protects us and keeps a cover over us.
The one really verse that gives me strength is that when he said he bore sickness on the tree and by his stripes we're healed. And so I know we're already healed in the first place. So if we know we're already healed and there's medicine out there that can help you, why would you not take it?
Well, I'm comfortable because God said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And he said to acknowledge him in all of our ways and he would direct our path.
The thing that keeps me Bible-wise is the word faith. It's to continue having faith in the one that gave us life, that gave us breath. And so he is going to continue to give us the strength that we need, the whatever it is that we need, just to continue to have faith. And you have to work in that faith.
All right, welcome back. Genoa, go ahead. You had a question for Dr. Kasiri.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, and I'll say this first. I remember when the pandemic first hit, and there were a lot of guidances and things that came in from the county, from the CDC, and one of those things was no singing in church. And I remember thinking, how are we gonna do that? I mean, that's such a big part of of our service and our spiritual experience.
Absolutely.
But obviously, in the last almost 2 years, we learned how to adapt. I mean, we are adaptable people.
Yes.
And so there became, outdoor parking lot church, people did Zoom, Bible study and all that. So I wanted to ask Dr. Kasiri, I'm going to also ask, sort of where we are for her to give us some numbers about, where we are right now with that devilish Delta variant. But also, what are some of the lessons you've learned in all of this over the last almost 2 years that we've been in this COVID reality?
Well, first, I actually want to thank Pastor Meeks and Pastor Joy Johnson for the words they've shared, because I was just nodding my head all the time, just saying, amen, amen, that's right, that's right. And I wish that all the pastors were of the same mindset. I think for the ones that have been able to work with us, it's been so great to be able to partner, because I believe that churches and church leaders have an important role in our communities. And them being able to go to the forefront of being able to bring the correct information and to bring the resources to the community is important. To go out, and some of them have even been doing part of the door-to-door, knocking on doors and asking people to come, talking to them and trying to convince them. And I think one story that I remember is when we were in a meeting and we asked one of the ladies whether she was going to get vaccinated, and her pastor was there as well. And she said, if my pastor tells me that I should get vaccinated, I will. So that just shows you the power that being able to have pastors who will encourage people to get vaccinated, how much that helps us. As far as where we're at right now with the Delta, oh my goodness. When it was June 15th, I thought that we were on the home run, everything was going in the right direction, and didn't realize that, well, of course, we knew that this virus can change, and that's part of the reason we were in such a hurry to get people vaccinated. And slowly the Delta variant came and just took a hold and just ripped through. And we've had a peak. We've had a surge that has almost gotten to the peak that we had in the wintertime. And I think many of you have heard us talk on TV and radio talking about the hospitals and that they're at capacity and our concern. And then now with children back in school, our concern for the children. The numbers have gone up for the children. It's about 20% of the cases we're getting are among children. But fortunately, most of the infections they're getting are mild But still, we're still not out of the woods yet, even though the numbers seem to be starting to go down. We still have very little capacity in the hospitals, and so we still need to go out with the message of vaccination. When you look at the numbers, and some people, when we say this, they think that we're trying to make them feel bad, but we're just trying to show these are the facts, and this is the reason why you need to get vaccinated. 80 to 90% of the people that are reported to us are people that are not vaccinated. 80 to 90% of the people in the hospital are people that are not vaccinated. And it's even a greater number of the deaths. So the vaccines, yes, they're not perfect. They don't give you 100% protection. And that is why, especially with the Delta, we have had to ask people to wear the masks. But they are definitely effective. And that's why it's important for us to be able to talk to people to get them to realize that this is what they need to do. And so again, I appreciate the faith leaders, leaders from the church who have stepped forward and said, yes, we need to do this. We need to speak to our people and convince them. I think one of the greatest lessons learned for me is the importance of relationships, because we've had plans, we've been planning all along for something like this, for a pandemic. If you ask any health department, they'll show you that we've had a pandemic plan. We do exercises and that kind of thing. But what I have found that has helped the most during this, in addition to the plans, is the relationships. Relationships with the hospitals, them being able to call me directly so that we can talk through the difficult situations. Relationships with the communities, and now that we do have resources to be able to provide assistance, it's been easier for us to build those relationships. So again, I'm very thankful for folks like Pastor Meeks and Pastor Joy. And my hope is that this won't be just for the short period of time. As Pastor Joy mentioned, we have a Health Equity Task Force, because we do recognize that the communities that were hit hard, it was because they started off with a lot of negatives in terms of resources, in terms of health. And this is our opportunity to be able to work more closely together and to see how we can close those gaps, just as we did for vaccinations, where now if you go to South Sacramento, some of the zip codes, actually, all of the zip codes are over 50% vaccination rates. And we want to be able to do the same for North Highlands, but also beyond that, to be able to work with the communities to rebuild, because many of them are still hurting. Many have lost loved ones. Many of them have lost their livelihood, their jobs, or their homes. And so it's not enough for us just to vaccinate and walk away, but to be able to continue to work together hand in hand with community leaders beyond this. So that's my hope.
Yeah, and Dr. Kasiriye, I'll say personally, I've appreciated your openness, your leadership. As a journalist, I've appreciated the weekly media briefings that you and your team continue to have and update us on numbers, keeping us fresh and refreshed on those, and sort of showing us, where the hot spots are, the continued need for diligence. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, Dr. Kaziri, when we first started talking about the vaccine, and even before the vaccine, was just getting testing, and we appreciate your ability to be nimble, because I remember saying, Dr. Kasiri, we need to hear from you every week about this virus, and you have stepped up to the plate in many ways. So I think speaking from our newsroom, we've been very appreciative of your ability to get information out to the community. With that said, I do want to ask, the county has been challenged, to say the least. We did some reporting where, there were some things that weren't necessarily in our favor, and we know that you've been working really hard to make sure that resources are flowing to our communities. From your perspective at the county, what are you seeing as far as resources coming into the community? You mentioned kind of rebuilding and not just vaccinating and leaving, but how the rebuilding processes goes, and how your role as county health officer plays a critical role in that, past the triage, but the recovery stage. How do you see the county stepping up and really continue to utilize trusted messengers like the faith community, and I will say, and the Black press as well too?
I think there have been a lot of lessons learned, and I think that the new process that's been put in place, it might not be perfect for the distributing the new recovery funds. I think is much better than we had before, and our commitment in public health is to make sure that we're able to get as much money as possible and be able to get that into the communities. We've seen the model work, not just when we were working with the 7 communities with the Black Child Legacy, but we built on that, and that's what helped us actually to be able to ramp up as soon as we got approval for the 45 million, to be able to get the money out into the community. And I think we want to be able to build on that model. We've seen how successful it has been with communities coming together, community-based agencies coming together and just going door to door and doing all the hard work. There's no way that public health could have enough people to be able to do all the work that's been done. But a lot of it has been carried by the communities, and we're very appreciative. And so that is something that is a priority for us, is to be able to, whatever money we get, as much of the resources that we're able to be able to put that back into the communities.
Great, thank you so much. And I think what I really want to make sure that we underscore is, we talk about the resources coming into the community and the numbers, but it's so much more than the numbers. These are people's lives. Folks are dying and getting sick, and we know that we can be strong advocates for ourselves, as your reporting showed, and that we have to be. And so we really want to make sure that we can fight on our own behalf. But we need great advocates like you in this. Now we've got a couple questions from some folks who have logged on and shared some of their questions. So here's a good question from someone who's very close to us, Mr. Antonio Ray Harvey, who is an observer, staff writer. He wants to know how many people were vaccinated at Juneteenth in Lamb Park this last summer. Do we have any idea, Dr. Kaziri?
I don't have the exact number. I know it was not a very large number. And that's what we found with going to some of the events, is at times we go to an event and a lot of people are interested, but at other times we go to an event and people are more interested in just having fun, listening to the music, eating food. So it's been a bit difficult. So I think those are areas where we've had some lessons learned in terms of when's the best time to have these vaccination clinics. So I know that it was not a lot at the land park, and I know I was there. So, but we did get a few people.
And I understand you're going to be in McClatchy Park, Dr. Kasiriye, this coming weekend?
Yes, for a short period, yeah. But we will have vaccine there as well. So hopefully we'll have more people getting vaccinated.
Yeah, great. We and Dr. Kasiri, you and the county and other advocates have been trying to make sure that there are mobile clinics as well too that help get folks vaccinated as well too. So we want to make sure and lift that up and encourage that as well too.
And I understand, Pastor Meeks, you have an event coming up as well that's going to hopefully reach out to the community.
And I'd be happy to. We will be in, and again, talk about a community event. You'll have testing by St. Paul. You'll have vaccination, mobile vaccination by UC Davis Health. City Church will be there along with the Oak Park at the Oak Park Farmers Market on the 12th. And excuse me, let me get my dates right here. On the 15th and the 22nd, excuse me, on the 15th and 22nd of this month, 4:30 to 6:30. And then going through October, we hope to be there every Saturday at the farmers market. And to underscore what Dr. Kisserie was saying, I just write down just little things that come to my mind. It's consistency and it's relationship. It's consistency and it's relationship. And it's you get one or two. It's consistency. And if the first time we have a health interaction, someone in a white coat has got a syringe in their hand and they're walking towards me, that's not a good interaction. But if I had been there prior to that, and I'm there even post pandemic, that's when things like this don't become huge problems in the future. Consistency and relationship.
Right, absolutely. Let's go to one more question. We're going to wrap up here. Let's see. Also from Observer Editor-in-Chief Steve Maganini, thanks Dr. Kassiri and Pastors Johnson and Meek for your leadership in saving lives. It's more so of a statement, and I think from all of us at the Observer, we are extremely grateful for the work that you do on the front line.
We also had a question from a viewer about for Dr. Kassiri about boosters. What's coming down the pipeline for boosters?
Good question. So right now, the boosters are approved for people that have compromised immune systems. We are still waiting for the details about booster doses for everybody else. We're expecting it should be sometime in September, probably closer to the end of September. And we're going to have to figure out how to roll that out. It will probably be a combination of having it at all of these different sites that we have right now, with the pharmacies, the doctors' offices, the hospitals. But we're also going to look at whether we need to have some special clinics where we just have large clinics for the booster doses. But those details are still being worked out.
To wrap this up, of course, we want to thank all of you for participating, but I want to say specifically to Pastor Meeks. We've talked a couple of different times from stories on what the church was doing, and you said something that was very profound to me, and you said that journalism is my ministry, and so it sort of changed the perspective on how I've been covering these things. And this particular issue, it has hit home far too frequently of late. And so we continue to tell the stories and uplift our people in these challenging times. So I thank you for saying that, for giving me that in my spirit.
Yes, all of our faith leaders add so much nourishment to the Observer, our staff and everyone. So we continue to lift you up in prayer and ask for you to continue to lift us up in prayer as well too. We will be wrapping this up, but I do want to just kind of give the last word to Genoa Barrow, as she's been working so hard and she's done such a yeoman's effort on this series. She does great work all the time, but this series in particular. Genoa, just tell us just real quick, how has your experience been with working on this project and with the support from USC?
Oh, it's been a quite an undertaking, but we knew that it would be. Trying to, like I said earlier, give a deeper dive into, how we've been impacted by this, and as I just said, it hits home. We could talk data all day, and obviously that's important, and sometimes that's all some people understand. But we know that those numbers are, the lady, we sit next to at church, the sister we sit next to at church, the person that, packs up our groceries, at the grocery store, those essential workers, our brothers, our sisters, our children, are being impacted by this. So that's what, drives me, because and I've been frustrated, and talking to folks, I just, at times been, angry. And a wise man once said, when I get angry, I write. And so I leaned on that. And so it's been awesome, And also, I was talking to someone at USC the other day, and we were talking about, how we're, calling to task, but it's also a positive. Right. The first part of the series was about how the efforts are, been largely community driven to bring about vaccine equity. Black doctors, taking the forefront. I know my child personally got her vaccine from Dr. Carter, who was featured in that first piece, and that brought her some comfort. Having a Black doctor, there in the community, that trusted, doctor, not just messenger, but, trusted, getting the shots and literally getting the shots in the arm. So, I've been bolstered by the fact that there are positives, even in this chaos, this craziness, that there are positives, and we're continuing to do the work. We have to. We have no choice.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for the work that you've been doing, and the entire Observer team has done a yeoman's job during this pandemic. If you haven't seen our recent redesign of our print product, we're very proud of that, and we hope that the response has been great. So if you're not a subscriber, subscribe. If you're not a supporter with the Observer Online, we ask that you could support us there as well too, or sign up for our daily newsletter that we send out every day. We're working hard over here, and our community deserves it. And we want to reflect that and make sure we continue to lift up the African American community through each and every page and each and every word that we write. So with that said, thank you, Dr. Olivia Kasiri, Pastor Mark Meeks, and Pastor Joy Johnson for joining us. Want to also make sure and thank our entire Observer team. Everyone on the team has played a role in making stuff like this come to fruition. But of course, this very specific program, Alana Banks, Russell Steiger Jr., Louis Bryant III, Ray Johnson, our photographers, they have captured so many wonderful images and during this time, and Craig DeLuz, who also helps us with the actual production of this project, and then of course Les Simmons for joining us via video and taking the time out to talk to us a little bit about South Sacramento Christian Center's efforts during this time. So with that, we wish you all health beyond health and wealth beyond measure, and of course the USC School of Annenberg School of Journalism for their support for Genoa and the entire Observer team. Thank you so much, and we continue to wish you blessings and be well.
Amen.